That's like Chris Evans going from Johnny Flame to all of a sudden being Captain America, and you're like, bruh, where'd you come from?
Have you ever seen Tom Hardy's MySpace photos?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Does that look like the kind of guy who makes good decisions?
No.
No.
Thanks a lot, Ray Liotta. Really killing it there.
It's actually one of his better roles.
He doesn't have many.
No.
He's got Goodfellas.
That, Goodfellas, and Killing Them Softly.
Yes, I was just about to say
Wasn't
that.
he in...
And the new Shantix commercial.
He was in Smoking Aces.
Sure. So is Josh Hartnett.
Welcome into Film Tank, the weekly podcast that covers both new and classic cinema. On this episode of Film Tank, we talk about the new Panos Cosmatos film, which is Mandy, starring Nicolas Cage. If you would like to get in touch with Film Tank, you can always email us at filmtankshow@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Film Tank Show. And you can listen to all of our episodes on our website, filmtankshow.com, or on iTunes. And now, here are your hosts, Nick Cheney, Toussaint Egan, and myself, Alex Diekman. Hey there, everybody, and welcome in to episode 168 of Film Tank. I am Alex Diekman, along with the regulars, Nick Cheney.
Hey!
And Toussaint Egan.
Well, howdy.
Well, howdy to you too, sir. And we also have a friend joining us today. Who could it be?
Hey!
Well, howdy, Sam.
Knock, knock.
Yeah, every time with this. We actually talked about this on
It's
our last
Eric
episode.
Estrada.
What?
Eric Estrada from
who?
Chips.
Oh my god.
Fucker.
Anyway.
Anyways.
Hey, how are you?
Welcome again, Sam. We haven't had you on since early summer, so it's good to
Been a
have you
little while.
join. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
thank you guys for having me.
What did we do in early summer?
I believe we did 2 episodes with Sam. We did Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom.
Oh, we did Hereditary. Oh, those
And
are great
Hereditary.
episodes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Hereditary is a good episode.
Yeah,
Fallen Kingdom is a very bad film.
that was rough.
Yeah.
But we saw it in the theater and we had a good time with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was being a grouch.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
There's no way you couldn't be a grouch while seeing that movie.
Yeah. Fucking wasted my time.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, it just came out on DVD and Blu-ray.
Get the fuck away from me with
In
that.
case you want to revisit
Get away
it.
from me with that.
only $24.99 at Best Buy right now.
That's
So
true.
I think Toussaint's got a
can't-
purchase to be made.
Put a price tag on something like that.
I mean, come on now.
I swear, if you guys gift me that for Christmas, I'm just gonna.
No, man,
now
I don't
we-
have I don't have enough money for that.
Yeah,
Now
exactly.
we will.
Money for that shit. Who's got
Don't
money
want to
for
spend
that?
it on that.
In this economy?
I will say, and I mean, we hit on this in that episode, but if that film was just a bad dinosaur film, I probably would have just let it go and said this is a bad movie. But when they decided to go with the human cloning part of it, that was it.
Couldn't
Yeah.
do it?
No,
Okay.
no. Speaking of weird movies, we are going to talk about a, at least on the outset, very bizarre movie today.
Venom.
No, believe it or not, that is not what we're talking about. But thank you, Toussaint, for that nice preview for a couple episodes from now. The film we're talking about today is Panos Cosmatos' new film, which is Mandy.
Mandy.
Mandy, starring Nicolas Cage and also Andrea Riseborough, who most people probably don't know, but she has been in quite a few things, most notably the Birdman film with Michael Keaton. So, this film surrounds Mandy, set in the primal wilderness of 1983, where Red Miller, a broken and haunted man, hunts an unhinged religious sect who slaughtered the love of his life.
Oh.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, seriously,
what?
bomb, bomb, bomb is right.
Of all the IMDb like synopses, like at least that was comprehensible.
Yeah.
Like that made fucking sense.
Some of the other ones we've read, I know you're just kind of like, obviously, like
Yeah.
that's
We do them
definitely
for
what
fun
that film
here.
is about.
Yeah.
Although I will say that plot summary is not IMDb to blame, but that is kind of one problem with trying to sell this movie, is that the plot of the movie is technically twofold. The first half is very different than the second half, and that's pretty much that summary is the second half of the movie.
Yeah.
But anyway,
We'll get into it.
we sure will.
Absolutely.
Sure will.
Thank you very much, Samuel L. Jackson from Django Unchained. But
I
that's
can't
okay.
not do that now. I think I've done that in like the past 5 episodes.
Sure was.
Sure does.
Sure was.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're doing Wolf of Wall Street. Okay. That was a really nice transition. Thank you,
Was
Suzanne.
it?
There's been good transitions in this film, though, so
Yeah.
it was
That's
timely.
true.
Yes. So other than Nick Cage and Andrew Riseborough, also there are a few people here that you've probably seen before, including Linus Roach, who plays Jeremiah Sand, the leader of the cult that captures Mandy Bloom. He apparently played Thomas Wayne in the first Christopher Nolan Batman
Wait.
film, Batman Begins.
Wow.
Why did you say that name?
Martha!
Do you mean
Thomas!
I saw...
Thomas! Why would you say that name?
That
it's
means
his father's
we
name!
saw Thomas Wayne's...
Kevin Costner!
Wow. That's where Batman came from.
Boom.
Yeah.
It
Yes.
just yeah.
Kevin Costner. Sorry.
Definitely not him.
No, Batman came from the Field of Dreams.
Wow.
He walked out
Is
with
this
Moonlight
heaven?
Graham.
No.
No, it's Iowa. Thanks a lot, Ray Liotta.
Oh.
Really killing it there.
It's actually one of his better roles.
He doesn't have many.
No.
He's got Goodfellas.
That, Goodfellas, and Killing Them Softly.
Yes, I was just about to say
Wasn't
that.
he in...
And the new Shantix commercial.
He was in Smoking Aces.
Sure. So is Josh Hartnett.
Oh, we were just talking about him.
We were, yeah.
He hasn't had a great career.
Collinson.
No, but he did kind of have a resurgence, and he was in Penny Dreadful.
He was.
And he was
This
supposed
is
to be
true.
very good in it.
That's actually one of my favorite TV shows to watch.
I have it on my shelf, the complete series, because it's right up my alley,
How
but I
many
have not
seasons
watched
has that
it.
been so
Three.
far?
Three.
Three.
It got canceled after
got
the
canceled.
third, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
But still, it got 3, which is actually pretty good for that genre.
That was...
I've watched 1 and 2.
Showtime.
No,
Yes.
but the main female is...
Eva Green.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know
Okay.
why, but every time I think of Penny Dreadful, I think of that one Taylor Swift music video where she's like, "Are we out of the woods? Are we out of the woods? Are we out of the woods?" Like, I don't
Leave
know.
it to Dusan to
Well,
transition
I don't know
us
why
back
either.
to where we're supposed
What
to be.
a great connection there.
It just gives off that vibe, you know?
Does
Well, I
it?
think
Sure.
I don't think it does.
I think what you're thinking. Well, at least
I watched it
the
once and I was
Sam,
like, "What the
don't-
fuck
now
is
hold
this?"
on.
Don't help him.
Hold
Sam,
up.
Sam
The
is a nice,
connection-
positive
Yeah.
teacher here.
I try to
I think
be.
what you're thinking of is not that.
It's basically like the worst smackdown ever. It's like you're so right, but you're so wrong at the same time. Let me explain this to you.
Okay.
True.
But I'm thinking of possibly. I mean, I haven't seen that music video, but I'm assuming like there's something in connection to the way visually it looks
It had fairy tales
in
in it and shit.
comparison
Sam,
to
you
like,
are reading way too far
when
into this because
Penny
Tucson is
Dreadful,
crazy.
like one of their like ads was like in a white wintry woods.
No, it's because that music video had fairy tale shit in it, and Penny Dreadful like dealt with like pulp fiction and like other ephemera.
So not
I
the same
definitely
thing
did
at all.
not connect that. I was looking more for like deep underlying, like maybe like visual triggers that
From
like
Tucson?
caused it. But
off.
I put too much stock into
Yeah,
that.
Tucson
I'm sorry.
has layeth the smacketh down on you when you have been denied. So
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah.
It's all right.
That's okay.
Anyway,
He does that. Anyways, the film we're talking about today is Mandy.
Mandy.
I just really want to play Barry Manilow right now.
It's really a missed opportunity that song wasn't in that movie in some
I
capacity.
agree. Yeah.
Roxanne.
Even if it was just playing in like a car while he was driving for like
Yeah.
12 seconds, would have been probably good. But it makes sense that it wasn't.
Tucson,
there, I
where's
guess.
your afro?
What?
What?
You mean my my?
Oh, I think I found it.
Yeah, Nick is, by the way, for listeners at
This is
home,
important.
Nick is
Rifling through Tucson's wallet.
Tucson's
Did you
wallet
find
right
it?
now,
What?
looking through a photo,
look for it.
looking for a photo of Tucson
really
with an
in
afro. Yep.
Can you get that out of there?
Let's see.
Oh, this
There's
is
something under there,
this is good podcasting.
and I
right
think
here.
it's what I want to see. Have you guys seen Tucson's Afro?
I have seen it.
See, I thought I lost this like ages ago.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
2 things under there, and I'm guessing one of them.
That's what he tells people.
No,
I lost this.
How many IDs? Hold on.
Well-
Do you keep all your old driver's licenses
Well, I
like
keep
in
the-
your
I
wallet
keep
with
the
you at all
last one in
times?
there.
Okay,
And
that
Because it looks like you have like
something else
4 right now.
that wallet is way too large.
I don't-
Do you, here's
Wait,
a
why do you
here-
have 3 of these?
Here's a real question. Do you have that in your... Is that you? Who is that? Who's that photo of?
That's my godson.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, is that a little photo of you? That little Tucson?
No,
I want to
That'd be
see
super
your...
weird.
I don't
Your-
have that anymore.
What the hell?
I couldn't find it. I know it's lost. I know.
Okay, so here's a question.
I was sad too.
This
All
is
right,
really
coming
important.
back. Come on.
Really important, though, before we move on. Do you have that in your back pocket when you're sitting?
Sometimes.
Oh, my God.
That's
You
thick.
must have back pain.
I don't.
Must have ass.
That is a George Costanza wallet right
Yes.
there. Holy shit. Gonna find
I
some hard
will,
candy in here.
I will admit, I put my wallet in my back pocket.
What the fuck does the Ellen Page movie have to do with my wallet?
Apparently, Tucson has never seen Seinfeld.
No, he
No.
definitely has not.
But that's okay.
Nope, I've never seen Frasier either.
What?
I don't know how that
Okay.
relates to
I don't
the
know.
story.
It's like, you know what? Like, there's some
I get
forms
it. It's
of
that timeline of like when those
there's
shows
no-
came out. I
there's
got
no
you.
form. There's some forms of like
Sam,
white suburban media
stop
that I
it.
just never consumed during the '90s.
I want him to
You
feel
are setting
included,
a
okay?
dangerous precedent for film tank where we have to oblige this fucking buffoonery.
Let's talk about the movie.
Yes.
All right.
Apparently, they didn't have Seinfeld or Frasier on the communal TV where Tucson grew up.
Go
But
fuck yourself. I watched a lot of Nicktoons.
that is not Frasier or Seinfeld.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay,
Guess
now
what?
it is starting
guess,
to sound
Guess
like
what? Kids
hard
don't
candy.
fucking watch Frasier. All right.
I went over to Dave's apartment in the afternoon, and Dave had all the cartoons on.
I had my own
That just
fucking
got
television,
really
dude.
creepy.
I'm
I
waiting,
had my
for,
own fucking television, dude.
I'm waiting for Tucson to be like, who the fuck is Dave? So,
Joke's on you, I didn't know it, Dave.
I think Nick should start here, not necessarily because this is right up his alley, but because it is, for one. And two, Nick actually went and saw this in the theater, which I think is important, because he saw this at the Music Box in Chicago, which is, you've got to make an effort to go there.
You do.
So, A, I want to know what you thought of it, and B, what you thought of it in theater setting.
Well,
Okay.
thank you so much for inviting me onto this podcast.
Usually we won't have you, but just
No.
because you saw this in the theater.
Yeah, no, it's a special occasion. Yeah, I saw. So this is. We all just watched it just now, all 4 of us. So this was my second time watching it. The first time I saw it, which was a few days ago, I saw it at the Music Box, like Alex said, and it was certainly a joy to see a movie like this on a big screen with a room full of people who were there, who have most of them who have not seen it before, who were just ready to see something weird and unexpected and starring Nicolas Cage. And we definitely got that. It's not that this movie is like false advertising in any way or anything like that, but it was definitely weird in ways that we were not expecting. And I would say most people are not expecting when they first sit down and watch it. I gotta say, for the most part, I thought when I first saw this movie that this was an experience. Like I had a beer, I was in a good theater, the sound system was cranked up, so I thought this was like, holy shit! I wish I had weed right now, like this, in a good way, like not like in like I wish
I need weed to get through this. Like,
no, but
like
it's
this
like,
would really,
this would be even better.
this
with,
would really make those colors pop.
yeah.
Especially that trippy scene halfway
Yeah.
through. Woo.
So I was just like, I was fully on board, and I definitely loved it. I think at the end of the day, what keeps me from thinking that this is like a cult masterpiece is that for me, this movie is just a barrel of shit. It doesn't mean anything, in my opinion. If you want to read shit into it, go right ahead, and I will not disagree with any of that. Certainly, there's stuff happening and whatnot, and I do know that I've read that this was with his last film and this film, which was Beyond the Black Rainbow. And
Beyond the
this,
Black Rainbow.
Yep, and this one was that apparently both of these films were reactions to Panos' parents' deaths. So, maybe it's very personal to him in some way or another, but if it is, all of that symbolism and whatnot is a little bit too layered into anything comprehensible. So I enjoy this as a sensory experience in which weird shit happens, ultra violence ensues, and Nicolas Cage every once in a while does something funny. And on that level, I genuinely thought it was successful. Like, I'm not laughing at this film like this is so bad it's good or anything like that. But I think it straddles the line between being just something fucking utterly unique in a good way and also something that should not be taken too seriously. And I seriously enjoyed it in that light. And so when we rewatched it today, I was curious to watch it on the small screen with, like 3 other people besides myself. Like, would it have any impact and whatnot? And while it was a much different experience, because I didn't, when I watched it the first time, I felt like I was trapped in it. Like I literally could not leave. I mean, that scene with the with Jeremiah, where he talks to Mandy when she's been doused with the LSD and whatnot. Even if that's nowhere near, in fact, it might be my least favorite scene. But even in the theater, that scene had like a profound, like weird visual impact on me when I was just kind of watching and going like, "Oh my god, where is this going?" Whatever. Mm-hmm. Watching it on the small screen, I will say it was a different experience, but it was still trippy and fun enough. I mean, the craft is there that I definitely still very much enjoy this movie. But I basically would not begrudge anybody for not liking it, because it's just there and it's nothing else. And what it is, I enjoyed, but I would never, I on this podcast alone, I will not really go to bat for it. I just seriously enjoyed it, and that's really all I can say for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I had thought that I would really enjoy this when I saw the trailer, because I really enjoyed a lot of what this film appeared to be to me. And I will say that for the most part, this delivered on what I was wanting it to be. Nick tempered my expectations by somewhat comparing this to the Neon Demon.
I didn't compare it. Well, I brought that up, but not for the reason you think. But
okay.
we'll get into that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
At any rate, I had tempered expectations after Nick sort of brought my thoughts down on this film, which is fine. However, seeing this film, this was not the Neon Demon or another film that Nick brought up, which is Hereditary, which I didn't care for either. I actually really, kind of opposite of Nick, enjoyed the storyline in this film, and actually thought that was one of the better parts of it, and led to more enjoyment from the images that we see throughout this film. Okay. Because, to me, this is really all about just coming to terms with somebody being taken away into a cult. And I think that storyline is super ambiguous, and it's really up to the viewer to take whatever they want with it, because although it is definitely part of the storyline, is there is a cult who is out kidnapping Mandy, the main female character. I think the entirety of the events that play out in the second half of the film are really up for interpretation, at least from my reading. So, to me, that part was only better from my brain, sort of taking it as an image of Nicolas Cage trying to, in his own brain, cope with the fact that his wife, girlfriend, whatever, was stolen by this cult. That being said, on a visual, visceral level, this film is fucking awesome. The coloring in this film is honestly just absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. The way that we shift from yellows to reds to grays to blacks, the way there are different colors superimposed on different scenes and different lighting. It obviously, there's a lot of, computer-generated coloring going on here and not actual color, at least from my reading from it. But at the same time, whichever way it was done, it looked really, really good. And I loved it pretty much from start to finish, and I didn't think it ever went away. Like, I was a little concerned that this film was going to have great coloring at like the first 30 minutes and then kind of go away from it. But I felt like from start to finish, it was fantastic here. And two, I will say, the mythical elements of this film really land pretty well. This is what I feel like something like Netflix's Bright was going for, but completely missed on.
Interesting.
No, and I guess that's
We're talking about the Will Smith,
Yes.
Joel Edgerton,
I am, but that's what I'm saying. That
buddy cop movie.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that film thought it was going to be this cool mystical film with these different characters and orcs and weapons and that kind of thing, and yet it completely fell flat.
I now that you just said those keywords, I kind of see it.
You're a little bit on what I was trying to go for. Okay,
right.
But in this film, I think it lands, and I think the biggest reason why it landed for me is because it was mostly an undertone throughout most of the film. Is like Nicolas Cage building his weapon and meeting with the guy in the trailer, which that scene was awesome. And just the entirety of the second act is very slow played and underplayed, and when it has its big showy moments, it feels like they're earned. And I honestly really liked it. So I wouldn't say that I like absolutely love this film, because I think there are parts of it that I thought were a little boring and I thought could have been done better. But overall, I think this is a very well done film, and a film that I think hits a lot of the right notes.
I think something before we pass it is that you would agree with me is that, like I kind of said before we watched it, that if this was like an 80-minute movie, maybe 90 minutes, this would be maybe perfect. Like if it took all of its parts that do work and whatnot. I just think that there are times when the movie lingers a little too much.
It's funny because...
Nah, man, the mythos.
It's funny because I'm not sure, but I think I slightly disagree with you in which parts should be taken out. Because I actually really enjoy the first hour of this film. I actually thought the first hour was very good.
I mean, I like the first hour. I guess I just thought you were not going to like the first hour.
Right.
That was my big thing that I...
You know, I actually thought the trippy scene was actually pretty good.
Okay.
And I also thought the early scene, which I commented on when we were watching the film, where Andrea Riseborough is telling Nicolas Cage about the story about her youth, where her father was having all of the kids having to kill birds and that kind of thing. I actually thought that part of the film was fantastic, and I actually thought that was a really good, just well done, not even just in this kind of film, just a well done film scene.
I'm with you in the sense that I would say that the scenes that I would think are trimmed, not cut, but should be trimmed, are scenes like when the guy and the few guys are out in their truck in the middle of nowhere blowing their ocarinas. And like that scene, if you actually time it out, takes like a good 5 to 6 minutes. Like it are scenes like that like I don't mind these elements being in this movie, but the, I guess, joke of the one guy rolling his window up and down, like, little things like that, I'm like, we don't need to linger in this moment. We can move ahead to...
The side characters in the cult, I think, were one of the weakest parts of the film.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So and that plays into what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But there's more to get on when we discuss a little bit more in detail here in a few minutes. But... Sam or Toussaint, whoever wants to go next, go right ahead.
I can go next. Okay. So I think that I might be, with the exception of Nick, the only person here who has actually seen Panos Cosmatos' last film, which is Beyond the Black Rainbow. Nick, have you seen it?
I've never seen it straight through. I quit halfway through.
Yeah, I watched it.
At least you're honest.
I will say it was mostly because I watched it at 1:30 a.m.
Yeah.
So it was
Makes
like,
sense.
whatever. And the fact that I haven't finished it probably says something, but I wouldn't say I hated it.
Beyond the Black Rainbow isn't the kind of film that you watch at 1:30 a.m. I mean, you can. It's more of the film you watch at 9:30 or 10. You know what I'm saying?
What about like 9:15?
What I mean to say is, like, it's the kind of film that you don't really watch with like full attention. It's more of like this
background.
Yeah, this delirious
It's
fugue.
another movie you get high for.
And
I don't mean that as a pejorative.
this sort of delirious fugue of like images and motifs and just like nods to other forms of media, because that's sort of like what the whole like prompt of that original film was, is that Panos would just like go through a movie store and he would see the covers of these films at like Blockbuster and stuff, and he would just imagine what they would look like. And so he basically like took that experience from his childhood and sort of projected that into this weird sort of like psycho, like sci-fi horror sort of shtick with the first film. With Mandy, I feel like he is sort of reprising that same sort of vibe, only this time he's kind of like going for a more a mythic, like revenge fantasy kind of vibe. Honestly, I did not think that Panos was going to be able to make another film, just because the last film came out in 2010 and it's been 8 fucking years since then. So I'm pretty just amazed that this exists.
This film, really quickly, this film premiered at Sundance. Does that sound right, Nick? You're the kind of person who would know that.
I don't know if it premiered.
Okay.
I want to say it didn't. I know for a fact it certainly that was
Was it
one
in
of
competition at Sundance?
the. No.
Okay.
I
But it
was
was at
99.9% sure no. But yes, it was at Sundance. I don't think it was the premiere. As far as it may have been the premiere at large, as far as the widest at that point audience maybe was able to see it then.
Now, was his original film at Sundance?
That I want to say no.
Okay.
I want to say that was like a cult sensation of like he somehow got it made, got it distributed, and then like maybe I want to say Magnet releasing or Magnolia, maybe Magnet.
Magnet seems like the kind of
which is a company that seeks out these kind of weird cult films and
like a magnet.
But now he's with Mandy, he's slightly more higher profile in the sense that we're doing an episode on him, so that means something. So yeah, he's outside of that realm where a company like that could just scoop it up and release it.
Yeah.
But I want to say Mandy was not premiered. It was mostly just that was probably the biggest splash at that time.
Okay. Very good. Sorry, Tucson.
Yeah, I think that this film, how can I really bring into cohesion my thoughts about this film? I think that it is very pretty. I think that there is a lot of texture to it, but aside from that, there's not a lot of else to chew on. I will say that at times I feel like I'm watching this film through like one of those old viewfinders where you just like click the side of it and it just like switch to a whole different tint. And, that's pretty cool. Like the actual color transitions are awesome. Some of the scenes, especially the one where the cult leader is like talking to Mandy before like the whole like laughing scene, is very trippy and very disorienting, and I like that. Unfortunately, I don't know if this does a lot for me. I'll be fucking honest with you.
Okay.
The finale of the film where Nicolas Cage actually like goes ape shit and goes on his final like killing rampage, I fell asleep through part of that.
Yeah, I know.
And I woke up like during some choice scenes, like one where he took his battle axe and like shoved it through the guy's mouth. Like it wasn't that I wasn't affected by that. I was just like, oh wow, okay. And then I fell asleep again. And then there's a church. And then I fell asleep again, and then I wakes up in the car, and I was like, "Okay, well, that's interesting." Yeah, this didn't really like do a lot for me. It's for me, it's a very slight effort, if not a ambitious like aesthetic exercise. I don't know. Yeah, there's not a lot of meat to like really like chew on the bone here. It's all just a very pretty bone, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Those are my initial thoughts.
Okay, moving on to Sam.
I second a lot of what Toussaint says. Going into this, I did not anticipate it being what it is. I came in with very different expectations for it. Whether that's because of the trailer that I saw, or just sort of looking at the synopsis of it ahead of time as well. And I am actually quite disheartened because I feel like, especially with how aesthetically pleasing it is, and how like just fantastic in the sense that like fantasy based the color scheme is, and everything about this piece in many ways, and a lot of the shots and things like that. I think Toussaint said it perfectly, that there's not any meat on the bones. It's just a pretty looking bone. And I definitely think that, because while I get the plot and I completely understand what's going on, I don't think it's anything new. There's no nuances to it. There's nothing, there's no new revelations. There's nothing that I found unique about it in that sense of storytelling. It's just another revenge story. And it just happens to have an 80s twist to it. It happens to have a little bit of a, I guess, change in the sense that there's, that she actually dies, supposedly. Yeah, you're looking at me like you want to ask a question.
Yes, I do want to ask a question. Sam, this is related.
I hope so.
This is
so,
totally related. When
Yes, a question about the brothers Solomon.
Shut the fuck up. Anyway, when exactly
A+.
did Stranger Things first come out? Was that 2013? Was that
Yes,
2000?
Sam, tell us.
Whoa.
Do you happen to
Step
know?
off.
Yeah.
I do not know.
The
2013.
The first season of Stranger Things was in 2016.
2016? All right. Well,
It's only 2018 right now.
Now, I've only seen the first episode of Stranger Things.
Okay.
So
I've seen both seasons, Tucson. Why didn't you ask me?
well, I didn't think
He
that was your
figured that
thing.
it would be something that
Yeah.
I would watch.
Back
I play
in
D&D. It
2013.
makes
I'm
sense.
just kidding.
When Stranger Things debuted.
Shut the fuck up. I thought, I'm not trying to like step on your toes
No.
on this, like, but I'm thinking about like Panos Cosmatos and like his whole like shtick as like a sort of aesthetic director
Right.
versus like a thematic or even like any type of story director. It's like I feel like he really got ahead of the pack in sort of a way with like sort of this 80s revivalism that sort of comes out of his work. It's like I feel like that's way more explicit and it's way more, like I said, texture and aesthetic based than like some of his other contemporaries. I feel like he was not a name back when Beyond the Black Rainbow came out, but I feel like he definitely was sort of like a precursor to when the floodgates just opened, like like the past 2 years, with like so much like fed into sort of like this 80s shtick.
And I think, kind of speaking to that in a twofold manner, I think, one, to speak about the 80s like theme of it, it does well for the mental, I guess, for the mentality of this film, especially with everything about the cults and a lot of those different aspects of the film itself.
Those are like fixtures of that time period.
Correct.
Yeah.
It speaks very highly to that. But at the same time, I'm curious as to whether or not this piece could stand alone had it been set elsewhere. And to me, that, I think, is something to consider when taking a storyline. Can you remove the story from the current milieu and put it elsewhere, and does it still stand? If it doesn't, what's wrong?
Sort of like It Follows. Like, I know that I am a big fan of It Follows on this podcast, and there are some people on this podcast, Nick, who are not. I'm just joking. I'm just making a joke. I'm taking the piss out of you. I know Alex hates It Follows, but I think that what that film does so well is that it's able to sort of like siphon off of those like motifs and that aesthetic, but it sort of anchors it in this weird sort of atemporality where you don't know when it actually takes place, and that's sort of part of the point of what makes that film so menacing.
Right.
So,
and to kind of finish off that trailing thought that I had kind of started already as well, I was not impressed by the performances. If anything, I thought it was too trying and too dramatic. It felt like a really bad drama, or like a really bad soap opera of, I say 2 lines, I pause.
I think that's the point,
I
though.
say 2 lines,
Yeah.
I pause. And I wasn't having it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just my mindset of the day.
Yeah.
Or, maybe if I watch it again in the future, if maybe there's a different mentality that I have approaching the film. But I was not impressed with it. I'm completely fine with films that are not very dialogue heavy. Oftentimes that's how those are some of the films that I actually enjoy, where you only have minimal conversation to the point where it's necessary. But for some reason, there was just, I think there were moments that were too dialogue heavy and they were too monologuist. And then on the flip side, you had no conversation whatsoever. And I just don't, to me, it wasn't balanced enough.
I would agree with you in the sense that, Alex cited earlier the scene in which Riseborough's character, Mandy, gives her monologue about the father and whatnot. And while I also like that scene, I'm also calling bullshit on it because it's the only time when any character is afforded any luxury of speaking like a person, and so therefore it only sticks out.
That's a strike against that scene, though.
Yeah, if it's gonna be the only scene in which they're gonna, a monologue is effective, but if the monologue itself dwarfs the entire cadence of the rest of the movie, it just feels forced.
It feels out of place.
Yeah. So I split the difference where I say, I didn't mind that scene and I thought it was okay, but I'm also with you in the sense that this movie, for having so little dialogue, was so overwritten.
Yes.
Which is weird to say.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
So
though.
I see where you're coming from, personally.
Yeah.
So what I will disagree with you about that scene in particular is that I don't think that part of the film is necessarily exactly what you're going for in terms of that. Only because I feel like her character is killed off so early in this film that it makes her stand out from the rest of the characters of the film.
Define early in this film.
Yeah,
because let's talk about the
yeah.
let's talk about the pacing.
It's an hour into 2 hours.
That is halfway.
Okay,
it's interesting.
She is the main character. Before Nicolas Cage
disagree with
shows
you.
up.
Okay, let's just go with this here.
What
did she? Okay, thank you. What? Nick is threatening to kill me right now. By the way, for all the listeners at home.
Yeah.
When if we're gonna get into runtime, if we're gonna play this game,
we're gonna play it.
Okay,
let's talk about the pacing of the film.
Yes.
Sure.
Let's
When is she taken and drugged? Is that an hour into the film? It is not.
That's
It's about
Well,
40
she's
minutes.
taken
40
and
minutes.
drugged
40
about
minutes.
45 minutes,
Okay.
but she's killed off at 56 minutes.
Okay.
No.
So that's an hour into.
But-
at that
but
point,
her-
Nicolas Cage is not a character in this movie.
That is true.
Correct.
But her character being able to be her as a person before she's taken only really happens during the first act of this film.
Okay, so all of let's just say this then. Everything you know about her as a character before she's drugged hinges on her one monologue.
I disagree with that.
Really? Because I just think that monologue is only in there because...
to give her a character moment. To give
Yeah,
her a
so
beat.
that way we think of her as a human being, even though this movie does not support either one of these characters as archetypes, or as anything more than archetypes.
I guess I would sort of half agree with you on that, because I feel like although both of their characters are actually that, I think her character actually has more depth, because I think she's the only character in the film that actually has some sort of depth, which is why I think the inclusion of that monologue and the inclusion of the other parts of her early in the film are crucial, even though those fade away, because she's the only character that anybody really needs to care about in this film.
And I think that also, to call your movie Mandy, to give her one sterling monologue, is just slightly overplaying your hand into trying to get the audience to buy into something that you don't quite have the money for.
Does this count as fridging?
That is actually something I want to talk about. Not fridging exactly, but...
You know what I'm getting at, though, right?
Oh, no, absolutely, because I do think that in the year 2018, to have a cult film center around a man who gets revenge for his dead partner, female partner, is pretty trite. I mean, we as a collective unit of the three of us, sorry, Sam,
That's
watched.
fine. I get it. It's because I'm a woman.
It is. No, we watched the movie Revenge, in which that was a slight spin on something of that nature, in which the woman gets killed, but actually she doesn't, and she gets to come back and fucking kill everybody.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's something to the fact that this is kind of trite in that way, because no female character in this movie is given any agency, because if you take Mandy... Hold on. Take Mandy, put her aside for 1 second.
Okay.
The cult women in this movie do not.
No.
Let's just be blunt about it.
The cult women in this movie are treated like the women in Mad Max Fury Road.
Correct. And I'm not saying that...
We are not things.
Okay.
So, and I'm not saying that doesn't fit in with the cult, plotline or anything like that.
Sure.
But just put in... So, having addressed them, Mandy, for me, serves to basically fuel the second half of this movie. I never quite bought her as a entity in and of herself. Literally, Nicolas Cage's character, Red, they wear the same shirt at one point. I mean,
44.
yeah, so
Love my president.
And a literal, I mean... I just thought more of it like Mandy was quote-unquote innocence, and once she died, so did Red's quote-unquote purity or whatever bullshit.
I definitely did not read that far into this piece.
I
I'm
didn't
not
read
gonna
that far.
lie. I just didn't.
It's not so much that I read that
wasn't
far
inclined
into
to.
it, because I'll admit I'm only kind of spitballing at this very moment.
Right.
But I genuinely don't think Mandy is there for any other reason than for Panos Cosmatos to have the playground Lynchian metal death song that is the second hour of this movie.
Yeah.
Oh, I think when we get to that, I think you're right. But I think her character, and again, it's for me, and that's why I'm sort of hammering this home a little bit, since I think I'm the only person who really thinks this.
Yeah.
But I think her character is actually really well defined, in my opinion. And I think she actually earns a lot of things early in the film. The most important part of the film for me, actually, is the end of the very trippy scene halfway through the film, when we see the face of her and the face of Jeremiah pretty much getting superimposed. That scene's fantastic. Which I don't really know what exactly to read from that, which I think that's pretty wide open for interpretation.
I think wide open for interpretation in this movie is code for...
There's nothing really in it.
Yeah.
It's so open-ended that you could really just,
I'm
put
with,
anything into
here's
it.
The thing is, once again, I'll split the difference, because I'm with you, Alex, in the sense that I enjoy that scene and I enjoy that effect. But I also watch that and think that these effects are the only thing keeping this movie from moving forward.
I think there are two strong points in this film. One is the crying scene with Nicolas Cage in the bathroom. I think that is going to be in a a compilation on YouTube of best Nicolas Cage freakouts. That is made for that.
The fisheye lens in that is.
Yeah, that's part of it too.
Just that whole shot, that whole scene was beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
And
two, color and everything.
Yes.
It was lovely.
Yeah, I will say though, with regards to those kind of compilations that are abundant on YouTube, unlike the scenes that are usually in those compilations, I actually think that's a good scene.
Yeah,
it's people like to put things in there from Vampire's Kiss or whatever.
They think it's overacted, but
right?
no, I
whereas,
think this is perfectly proportionate to what the fuck actually just happened, though.
Yeah, and I love that scene.
And two, I love the Cheddar Goblin. The Cheddar Goblin is wonderful, and we need more of that in Hollywood.
Yeah. Oh, man, that commercial is fantastic. The way the little kids just scream, yay, as they're being, puked mac and cheese.
It's goblin good.
And you know what? What's great about that scene is that after it happened, you asked me if that was a real scene. And
that's
what I mean. I also had that same thought when I first saw this movie, because it is so wonderfully captures the aesthetic of those commercials, not necessarily the content, because that's what's kind of hilarious about it. But it
It's
looks
so ridiculous it feels like it could be real.
it looks eerily like something that you may have seen before, but you can't quite remember.
Where I was going with Mandy's character, though, the end of that trippy scene, when she just starts
Laughing.
ridiculously laughing at Jeremiah and his exposed penis. That scene I thought was absolutely wonderful, and actually a fantastic scene for her as a character, because then we get the transition to them burning her as if she's a witch, and the transition from her being this mythical figure that just came to me and spoke to me, and then she just laughed at my fucking embarrassing dick, so we're gonna burn her because she's a witch.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fucking brilliant.
I would agree with that in the sense that I very much enjoyed the extremely brutal paradigm shift as to how Jeremiah views her at first, which is like as a pariah. Like, I see her outside my van, therefore she is like clearly a gift from God that I must have and meet and whatnot.
But
Which
also,
was really creepy, by
Yeah.
the way.
oh my god,
I mean, it speaks
Like-
to
And-
a pre-existing sort of undercurrent, a thought of like people who believe that the world is created for them.
Yeah.
the world is
Yeah.
their oyster.
And I agree with Alex in the sense that then after they have captured her, which first of all we'll talk about it probably right after this, but that scene is fantastic with the actual creatures that
Biker
they,
Cenobites.
that they basically like. I don't know if they not hire, but like recruit in helping them.
They have something that the creatures want.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that whole scene afterwards, after they capture them, or her, well, both of them.
Yeah,
actually.
they capture both of them.
Yeah, and have her whatever. That is the one scene that I will grant you, Alex, in the sense that so I basically see where you're coming from, because I do see her as a character having her own autonomy, because that whole scene is so creepy. It goes on for a long time.
Yes.
And in a good way, I think, actually. It's kind of uncomfortably long. So when Jeremiah spouts off all of his stuff, it's very funny to see the juxtaposition between all of his neophytes just laying on the couch, quote-unquote, absorbing what he's saying, but also not really. I mean, like, what do they have to do other than just sit there silently?
It's very clear after the master pretty much gets dethroned, after she starts laughing at him, that they all are basically like it almost feels like after at the end of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, when everybody finds out that Harry's still alive and all of the Death Eaters are like, getting the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
It's like the
And they all just start flying
Yeah.
away. It's like, well, this guy's full of shit.
it's like the story of the emperor has no clothes, only the king has no dick.
Yes. And
Well put, you saw it.
And for him to, what I would assume do his whatever routine as far as look at me, feast upon this dick.
I'm Mr. Meeseeks, look at me!
Yeah.
Feast upon this dick.
Feast upon this dick. You mean
Please.
this
What's great about that scene is that in that scene, even though he is like lurking above all, and
Bruce, you're hard. Sorry, it was too timely.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it was.
Sorry, buddy.
Looming over everybody, whatever. It is only she that actually controls the mood of that room after she starts laughing intensely. And what's great about that, too, is that that's the prelude to that scene is her being chained up in the kitchen.
That scene's also fantastic.
Which is great.
Yep.
With her being kind of a bunch of different things.
Well, no, the women are telling her if you just play along, he will be okay.
Yes. Yes, and I absolutely, and so for her not to do that, but also for her not to do that under the influence,
Yeah.
like it's just maybe she and I'm genuinely saying maybe because I don't think she's defined enough for me to truly start going down avenues of what she would or would not do, what if I haven't seen it, but the fact that she not sober. She still does not let...
Would she have played along if she was sober?
Yes, that's what I mean. Like, this is such a backfire of a horrible situation for him that it's A, slightly comical, because, and I mean that literally, because the way he turns to his followers and says, "Do not look at me," is great. But how she controls that only for that to be her downfall. I mean, because she employs her power in that room, unfortunately, that's what then leads to the next scene, which is that...
Although her downfall is the downfall of that entire cult, so...
Yep. So, I think the crux of this movie, which is that kind of mid-scene, where it transitions from that first half to that second half, is actually fantastic, which is why I'm actually a fan of this movie, so I don't mean to, like, shit on it or whatever, but I feel like everything that comes before and everything that comes after is surface pleasure only, for me personally.
I could understand that. I mean, I'm not trying to like hark on this like it's a masterpiece or anything like that, because I don't think it is.
If somebody did, I wouldn't even really like it. This is a movie in which it is an easel with such defined colors and shapes, painted on it, the canvas itself, that I can't begrudge anybody for coming to any conclusion, because what is in front of us is so defined as what it is that I wouldn't really hold it against anyone for either failing to connect or to, compared to myself, over connecting. So, yeah.
It just seemed like you were still about to finish another thought or something.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Sure.
Jesus. So let's
You
go
can
into
cut that out if you want.
let's go into ending thoughts.
Not a chance. Was there anything else anyone wanted to discuss? I felt like somebody mentions Nick. You mentioned.
I mentioned
something.
one thing, which is the thing that I wanted to bring up.
Was it the kidnapping?
No, it was
No,
something.
'cause we talked about that.
Oh boy, it was something right. Well, I guess I said we were going to, but we kind of already talked about it. But yeah, I guess it's the kidnapping in general. Those creatures that they summon,
Yes.
which I guess just wanted the blood sacrifice of the Ermin Thurman or whatever from Bad Santa, whatever his name is. Yeah, it's so weird for this movie, and that was one reason why I thought you might not like this movie, Alex. I mean, just might, is that because this movie is literal. I mean, it can be symbolic, it can be whatever, but what is happening in this movie, I really don't think you are to think, oh, is this really happening? No. What you see from start to finish is what is happening, and it's what you make of that as the audience, as to what you want to get out of it. And so that's why I was reminded of something like the Hereditary ending, where what is happening is actually happening, and therefore now I can understand why the difference between a movie that commits to it from the beginning to a movie that builds up to a ambiguous yes or no ending. Like I see the difference between that. But this movie is very literal in that when one of the cult Goombas get out of the van and blows into his ocarina to summon the Cenobites from Hellraiser to assist them on their... Which is so weird, because it's not that it needs to be explained, but there's never really any reason why they needed them. Like, there's 6 or 7 cult members. I don't think Andrea Riseborough and Nicolas Cage's character were all that, self-defense, whatever. So, I feel like they could have captured them without the... aid of Lynchian monsters behind the Winky's diners. It's such a bizarre scene, but it definitely totally works for me. I mean,
I don't believe that anything in this film deserves to be mentioned in the same breath as Winkies.
I wouldn't mention it in the same... that's one of my top 5 favorite films.
I know.
Time, so.
I know. It's just, I'm saying that Winkies.
So I mentioned it in the same fucking breath, Tucson.
Winkies is so much
because
superior
I'm comfortable
to that.
in my own film viewing.
That's cool. That's fine.
I think it has a certain quality to it that reminds me of the fucking Winky's Diner. It's characters, shrouded in black in a dirty whatever, in strobe light, which is one of Lynch's favorite parlor tricks. So I like that scene quite a bit, and even if I feel like there's no reason for it, that's kind of what... That's probably the thesis of this movie. There's no reason for any of this.
No.
And yet that's why it works usually, I would say, most of the time.
I would, for the most part, agree with that. The idea of summoning the creatures from... I think that just plays into the entire cult thing for me. It just makes that mystical thing seem more real to them.
Yeah, but it's mystical without being fantastical because you're watching it, and like I said, you're never really led to believe that this is not real.
Sure.
So it's almost like, so if the cult technically has actual, speed dials to these weird beings or whatever, then not that I would take them seriously, but also like, you can kind of see why, I wouldn't say the movie has empathy for the cult, but it's funny how well the cult fits into this universe. Whereas they're not as crazy, maybe sadistic, violent, brutal, misogynistic, whatever you want to call it, but maybe they're not as insane as they would be in a normal movie.
There's a reason why people believe them.
Yeah.
It's much like The Guilty Remnant for me.
Yeah.
Nice leftovers reference for all of you folks out there who haven't seen the HBO show. That's actually very good.
It's very
Third
good.
season's very good, by
It's
the way.
very good.
Very good.
Very good.
Very good.
So who wants to go on to final ratings?
I'll go.
Okay. Very good.
Hey, my name is Nick.
Hey.
That's all I got. I think this was a very fun film. I will admit, I'm probably going to have that quote-unquote nostalgia factor for something that just happened 3 days ago. But to quote from one of my favorite movies, Kicking and Screaming, I became nostalgic for things that happened yesterday. Anyway, watching this in a theater with a beer, with the sound cranked up, with a bunch of people who were just ready to be assaulted, this movie really worked. It was an experience, and I definitely think even watching it now a second time, it pretty much reaffirmed what I liked about it, which is that this is a fun experience. It doesn't add up to anything for me, but scene by scene, I'm never not taken with it, and I enjoyed it for that reason. So I would give it 3.5 out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to echo some of the sentiments that Nick just went through. It was like it's kind of insubstantial. Doesn't really offer much outside of what it is, and what it is occasionally a very gorgeous and a very gory, bare bones revenge fantasy. And I didn't like it that much. I fell asleep towards the end of it. I feel like I should go back and watch it, but I'm just like, should I though? I was like, I feel like I would have just gotten everything I could out of it. I think that this would totally be different. I could totally see how this would be different in a movie theater, just because there are some films that are just intended to be shared in a communal space that is built for the sole purpose of like ingesting film. And I feel like this is probably one of those films that deserves to sort of like enter into that sort of like canon of experiential like weird cinema.
I will say really quick, if you think the grain looks good on, home video,
Right.
the grain just completely blown out on a big screen just made it look like something that accidentally did drop from the 80s. It was kind of unreal. Anyway.
And I've been a fan of Cosmatos' affect before. I mean, I enjoyed Beyond the Black Rainbow a lot more than I thought I would. The first time I watched it, and I probably would go back to it. With this, though, it didn't really do a lot for me. I know that this is what's his name, Johannes Johansson's
Yes.
Last score.
like his last score. I hate to say this, but I really prefer the score in Beyond the Black Rainbow because that was Sonoa Caves, and that fucking slaps. That was really good. This is a good score, but like,
Okay, why don't you tell Johan's parents?
well,
Ouch.
well, that's not my place to say that. I was like, I think he's whatever. Overall, I would give this like a 1.5 out of 5. I thought it was okay. It's very pretty. It's not much left for me. It's just not my thing.
kind of echoing some similar sentiments. I get what it's trying to do, and I, especially after hearing the discussion too, I can see how some of these things are imposed upon it, or that you can gather from the viewing of it. However, there wasn't a whole lot for me to take from it. And I think Nick, you had mentioned it earlier, that if it had been cut down to like 80 minutes, 90 minutes maybe, I think I could be more inclined to enjoy this film. But I think that there was a lot of dead space, that just simply was too exaggerated, too much. That I mean, kind of like Toussaint, I started to doze off towards the very end. I mean, I watched the sick way that the dude was like, his like skull was crushed. And honestly, I felt nothing, and I kind of started to doze off, with that, which is bizarre in its own right, but whatever.
I will say the last death is the weakest for me. Like, it kept leading up to, like, in my opinion, like, really gnarly stuff.
Yeah.
And then that was just kind of like...
He doesn't even use his weapon in the last death. It's kind of weird.
So,
Anyway.
it's... I think it was taking on too much all within one film. Especially with being as out there as it was, cinematography-wise, with how unique of a view, or like the colors and everything like that were going on, and then when you couple that with something that's that they're trying to do something new to plots and to all these other things, it just didn't work ultimately for me. I will say that it was absolutely gorgeous to view it, especially with that transitioning of colors. It felt very much like a color wheel, and some of those camera angles and things like that. I was very impressed with, and those are some of the coolest shots that I've seen. But overall, it definitely does not seem like a film that's worth a second viewing to me. If anything, like, if it's on, I would be like, okay, but I'm definitely gonna like channel surf over it. So I give it 1.5 as well.
Very well. So I will join up with Nick and give this film a 3.5 out of 5, as I thought this was actually quite enjoyable. And this is not a film that I don't think would be up my alley necessarily, but I think for whatever reason this just hit a lot of the right notes with me as a personal film viewer. This had a lot of the kind of tones throughout that I like in films. This definitely had a lot of the great shots and looks it did. I mean, there's just, the coloring in this film is just fucking amazing. From start to finish, it really never comes and goes. It's always constant throughout the film, and it is just wonderful to look at. And I actually thought the story here was actually quite good for me. I was intrigued, really, from the beginning to the end. And I actually do think the first half is actually better than the second half, because I think some of the killing scenes could have been a lot better. But that being said, I think as a sum, this film is just actually quite fun and quite intriguing. And I do think it's a very polarizing film that some people will like, some people will hate, and I think that that's very apparent on this podcast.
Just a little bit.
And the other thing is, too, is I feel like that I could have easily watched this film and been in a bad mood and not liked it.
Yeah.
Which probably is not a good thing for this movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I watched it this first time and thought it was quite wonderful. And I just enjoyed a lot of aspects of it. So, yeah, I give this a 3.5 out of 5. So, big fan right here. But just pretty much in agreement with you, Nick, that anybody who has a negative feeling on this film, that's totally understandable. Yeah. So, you out there in Film Tank land, if you have any thoughts on Mandy, first, hi. And please send your thoughts on Mandy on to us at filmtankshow@gmail.com.
And send us your kidney.
What?
Please don't listen to Nick. We do not want/need your kidney.
Speak for yourself. I don't need it, but I want it.
That's a very interesting...
It just got creepy.
It did a little
Just
bit...
like Mandy.
It did a little bit because somebody who doesn't need a kidney who wants a kidney is possibly a bad person.
You looking at me?
I'm thinking I'm back. Sorry. Also, you could try to find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Film Tank Show. Good luck to you. Yeah, we're probably not going to be there, but try anyways.
Gotta keep moving.
Coming up on our next episode, we're going to delve into the Halloween horror genre a bit, as we are now in October, and we're going to talk about the Sam Raimi film from 1981, yes, which is The Evil Dead, which is, for the most part, what many believe to be a classic horror film.
Hell yeah.
I've never seen it, and I know it's rated NC-17, so I'm interested to see why it's rated NC-17. It might have been just a timing thing.
It's one of those things where Sam Raimi was ahead of his time with effects.
I could see that.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to watch it and interested to talk about it because I know it has obviously spawned sequels and shows.
And I was going to say, and a TV show.
Yep. And Tucson is now dancing. So I don't know why that's happening. Could you, fill us in on that, or?
No, man.
He's just feeling it.
Yeah, I'm feeling it. It was a good episode.
Okay.
This is a good episode.
Thank you. Okay. So Tucson is giving his 2 cents. And I think that's a good spot for us to jump off. So, from...
fucking cliff.
On that note...
Don't kill my vibe.
Yep. Thank you, as always, to Sam for joining us.
Thank you,
for
Sam.
having
Always
me.
very
Thank
appreciative
you,
that you're able to
Sam.
join us. And we look forward to our next episode with you.
We
Yeah,
do.
whenever that is, I'm cool. I'm good with it.
Yeah.
She's cool and good with it. Yeah. So, from Sam Shamara, Tucson Egan, Nick Cheney, myself...
Hey!
Myself, Alex Diekman, and my ears that are no longer there. Thank you very much for joining us here on Film Tank. I know they're gone. We'll catch up with you next time.